10 o'clock Thursday morning. Welcome in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you on this Thursday. Lots of things to jump into. I'm going to talk with intern Joe coming up a little bit, discuss some baseball and some basketball as well. But Wes, want to start off with this. We've obviously been big proponents of the return of college football video game coming up this summer. We got the teaser trailer the other day. It's supposed to be a more official gameplay trailer coming out here in the next couple months. But one big question with all this that we've wondered is who's going to be in the game? Was it going to be actual players? Was it going to be just kind of generic, mods that you can go in and modify yourself or whatever it may be? We got more confirmation on that earlier this morning. We found out all 134 FBS teams will be in the game, including Notre Dame. That was a question mark on them for a while. And all players will have an opportunity to opt in via NIL, where they can get $600 as well as a copy of the game and be a featured part of the video game.
Yeah, sort of what we expected. Actually, a little bit higher number. Previously was reported that it'd be around $500, which, ends up being a pretty good, I guess, fairly accurate report there. $600 plus $70 would kind of be the value of the game, you would think, and somewhere around there. And so basically they got to download this app starting today, and between now and April, they've got to opt in, essentially. And from an NIL standpoint, it is believed that when this is over, it will be one of the biggest NIL deals in history of the NIL era. And that's because you just have so many guys who are potentially going to be opting in. Of course, they're saying probably 85 guys per team will be selected. Just because you opt in does not mean you're 100% in the game. EA will then make their decisions on who goes in, and you inevitably will have people who don't opt in.
Sure.
So that's going to affect the numbers as well. But this thing now, as official as it can be, that the particular players will have a chance to be in it, and that they now just need to go in there and opt in if they want to be in.
So that total number, because again, you have 134 FBS teams, roughly 85 scholarship guys per team that have the opportunity to opt in at $600 per player. That deal works out to be about $6.6 million when it's all said and done. Again, EA Sports, this massive company, video game giant, all that kind of stuff, that's obviously within their wheelhouse to be able to afford. But, this is, again, when we kind of talk about NIL, and when we talk about where we've gotten in the past 10 years, we go back to the lawsuit, the O'Bannon case that ended the video game in the first place 10 years ago. That really was kind of the tipping point for a lot of these things to fall into place for NIL to come to fruition in 2021, which we've obviously been dealing with ever since. Still trying to wrangle it in a little bit, but now we've really come full circle where you have the game back. Now you have players the opportunity to opt in. And look, do I think it's going to be the 3D scans like we see in Madden where, okay, that definitely looks like Joe Burrow? No, I think it's going to be more of just name and numbers and all that kind of stuff with, the attributes of, hey, here's his hometown, here's his height and weight, and all that kind of stuff. But still, it's a whole lot better than where we were a decade ago, where essentially EA Sports was putting these guys in the game, but disguising it as, instead of Johnny Manziel, quarterback number 2 from Texas A&M, where we knew who they were, but they couldn't officially say that or pay these guys.
Yeah, and I think when you look at, to me, the big one was always like Tim Tebow, and it's like, all right, that is 100% Tim Tebow,
right?
And they somehow got away with this for years, and I'm kind of surprised that they didn't get called on it even earlier than they did, but and they could have honestly avoided it by just putting random but editable,
sure,
players in the game, but they didn't, and here we are. And so this is cool. Players get to be in the actual game where there's an acknowledgement of, hey, it's you. I still think 80%, 90% of college football athletes will be like, I get the game for free, and I get $600, and I get to be in a video game. Like, I can't download the app fast enough.
Right.
And then there will be some upper-level guys that will strongly consider the pros and cons of, am I wanting to set the bar at $600 for me, basically. And I think a lot of those guys you would think ultimately will lean on the branding side of just being in the game versus not.
Sure.
But they'll have other opportunities to make money off the game as well because EA is going to contract with some brand ambassadors. So I would think that what EA will do is likely opt-outs, big-name guys will have some opportunities to make some more money if they want to be in the game. And that, to me, makes a lot of sense because you are then asking them to do more.
Sure.
So you're not paying them more to be in the game. You're technically paying them for promoting the game.
Yeah, and that goes back to, several months ago, Caleb Williams, who is now going to the NFL draft, so he wouldn't be in this game anyway, had mentioned that he wasn't sure if, given the opportunity, if he would opt in or not, because he's somebody that, is pulling in millions of dollars through NIL out there at Southern Cal. I've seen pictures of his penthouse apartment that he has out there in LA, where $600 doesn't really mean a whole lot to him at the end of the day, where he probably values himself higher, saying, hey, if you want me to be in the game, you got to pay me X amount of dollars. Again, this is a flat fee where everybody's getting the same amount, whether you're the first-string quarterback that's, going to be on the Heisman watch list or theoretically the backup left tackle, whatever it may be. Everybody's kind of on a level playing field. But like you said, there's the opportunity for, these high-level guys to be more in commercials or promoting the game on Instagram or whatever it may be, where you have those opportunities to maybe pull in some of those guys that are a little bit more questionable on whether they want to be in it or not. But as we talked about with the Caleb Williams thing, I didn't want the superstars, and again, you're talking about a very small percentage of college football players, to ruin it for everybody else. Because again, 80-90% of these guys, hey, I'm happy to get $600 no matter what. And some of these other guys that are on the higher end, who it doesn't matter as much to them, I just didn't want it to be a factor where they say, well, we don't want to be in it, and that affects everybody across the board.
Yeah, and I'm curious. We're now going to start to find out. We're going to hear guys, I would imagine, be asked, hey, did you opt in? Are you still deciding? What's your plan? I think it's going to be actually, in some ways, a fascinating experiment because we're going to get an idea of, what percentages are sort of in one category of, hey, $600 and I'm in the game. That's awesome. And which guys are in the category of, that's not that much money. And so I think how this goes will probably determine how future college video games potentially go. Do they bring back a basketball game at the college level at some point? Is this game going to be something that makes financial sense for EA Sports moving forward? They're moving forward with this game, but are we going to see a yearly iteration? That's how EA wants to handle their sports games, but
right.
How all this goes is going to determine that. Is it a big just headache every time to try to get the top guys in?
Right.
I think will be a factor in this as well. But I think EA can make this as cool as they want it to be, as in terms of getting their actual likenesses.
Sure.
Because now you can have an app where you can let the guys upload their own photos.
That is a good point.
So, you've had that in some video games like Create a Player for years, where you can take a photo and then the system just maps it to a 3D shape in the game. So
right.
I'd imagine they could just send some particular app, and then let the players themselves handle, with approval from EA, of course, but
right.
let them handle hey, you can make your player in the game as in-depth as you want. It depends on how long you want to take, taking selfies basically and
right.
plugging yourself onto the 3D mapping within the game. So I think that's something that actually could be in the cards, where these guys could be fairly accurate in terms of the modeling in the game.
So I did the math here. Again, when you're talking about these roughly 11,000 players across the 134 FBS teams, to break even on the $6.6 million that they would be spending on these guys alone, you're having to sell about 94,000 games, which I don't think that'll be a problem. And of course, that doesn't also encompass the, paying your developers and all the fees and all that kind of stuff for actually making the game itself. But this game is going to sell very well based on what we just know as two people that used to play the games themselves, and kind of the support that this game's fans had for so many years waiting for it to come back. This is going to be a very well-selling game. And like you said, it does kind of set the tone for the future of college sports games, college basketball, the March Madness game. Did you ever play the MVP baseball games they used to make back in the day? Those were pretty fun too.
Those are great.
I don't know how high of a market demand something like that has, but I'd certainly like to see something like that make a comeback. But again, this kind of be the tipping off point of another era of college football video or college sports video gaming that we got to enjoy through the 90s and the 2000s. And hopefully, this time it does include everybody that wants to be a part of the game, as we're seeing here with the college football video game.
Gamecock football officially casting their lot here. Good timing from them. They just tweeted, "We're in," with a photo, with a graphic of a obviously not the real game cover there.
Nice.
But all the teams are going to be in, but I think you're seeing most schools will use this as a reason to tweet today.
Oh, for sure. No, and again, it's a marketing tool, something that we've been waiting for a long time. And, kind of mentioning guys opting in or opting out. I can't remember who we talked about this with, but as this was coming up, we've had several football players in. We asked them all kind of the question of, hey, would you want to be a part of this video game? And I think everybody resoundingly, said yes. And there's also the culture in the locker room part of it too, where, again, you have 90% of your teammates, 95% of your teammates saying they're going to be in it. Do you want to be the one guy, either whether your NIL stuff is a lot better than everybody else's or not? Do you want to be the one guy in the locker room that's not that's not, in the conversation of, oh, your rating's this, my rating's that, or whatever it may be? Like that's something that could also factor into it too, into what these guys ultimately decide to do.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want for the entire team to be in there and then you to be the quarterback and there to be a generic, just playing guy.
Right.
In your spot, because I don't think the whole reason we got into this was because EA was, as we said, creating a player in the game that had all the attributes of a player in real life. They're not, if they don't have your likeness, they're not going to make that player look like you and play like you.
Right.
I think so. Do you want just some rando in your spot in the game? I mean, I don't say I know how college kids think these days. So who knows? Maybe some guys don't even care about that. But
Sure.
I would imagine there's a little bit of locker room pressure to want to be in the game, and you don't want to be the one guy when these guys are going to play this. So when we do the interviews with the guys, and we're not talking about football, we ask what do they do in their free time. Not all of them, but most of them, it's I play the game.
Yeah.
And it's almost always 2K, Madden, and Call of Duty. Like those are the three games. And so this game will 1,000% be added to that list. And I think that is probably something EA, just from a business standpoint, that's something they have going in their favor as well. They did, by the way, sell roughly 1.5 million copies the last time the game came out. I'd imagine you're going to easily double that because of all the pent-up demand from the last decade.
You tell me my copy of NCAA 14 is going to go down in value?
What? It may not. I don't know. Those things are going for hundreds of dollars online now.
Hey, I'm not giving it up, by the way. It's a good game. But yeah, very cool to see. Very excited for when this does ultimately come out in July, and excited to see what everything looks like with all the players and all the teams being involved with it as well. Coming up next, we're going to talk to intern Joe from Gamecock Central, have some conversation about baseballs. They had their 5th game of the season last night, picking up another victory over Queens College. Really quick, want to remind you, coming up tonight, very busy night here on the game. Got Carolina Calls at 6 o'clock with Coach Paris, and then that'll lead right into coverage of women's basketball to take on Alabama at 7. Pre-game coverage for that starting at 6:30 on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW. Intern Joe from Gamecock Central up next, talking baseball here on the game.
All right. All right, guys, continue to tell you about our friends at Integrated Media. Call them today, 803-948-8327, or head on over to integratedmediainc.com. They've been at Chris Clark's house. They've been at my house. We want to send them to your house as well. Do you want to transform your home into a smart home? Are you interested in upgrading that home theater system, or maybe even going all in on creating a home theater system? Make your entertainment room the place to be with our friends at Integrated Media. They've got great services that span from a home theater, like I said, smart home devices and systems, any AV solutions, and even security and cameras as well. For me, it was as simple as wanting some hardwired internet run throughout the house, run into my office. They handled that, and we included whole home Wi-Fi while we were at it. Now I've got a great signal throughout the home. Whatever it is you want to upgrade involving your AV systems in your house, hit up our friends at Integrated Media, integratedmediainc.com.
To the Somerville Slugger. Swinging a high drive in the air to left field. It's up and it is gone. A 3-run blast from Cole Messina. The Gamecocks climb on top 3-0 here in the bottom of the first.
Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Tower Towerhead and Wes Mitchell along with you here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. That was called last night on the Gamecocks Radio Network. Cole Messina's first inning blast put them up 3-0 over Queens College. That eventually led to the 13-3 run rule game after 8 innings. Now go out to the Left Chevrolet phone lines. Welcome in our guy, intern Joe, to talk a little bit of baseball. And Joe, you know, now that we're through 5 games here, Gamecocks have outscored opponents 55-10. We fully expected this offense to continue to perform at a high clip, much like they did a season ago. Have you maybe even been surprised by just how dominant they've been through these first couple of games?
Yeah, absolutely, guys. This offense is better than it was last year. That's saying something, right? Even in these first couple of 5 games, they haven't been playing up to, you know, their standard of greatness, right? I mean, a couple guys have gone off. They've been able to generate runs. Their plate discipline has been immaculate. But the biggest thing with this team is, you know, 1 or 2 guys is going off, but the whole squad has yet to really put it together and really have an offensive explosion like we've seen in years past.
Joe, I know you're at the game the last 2 nights. Midweeks can always be not difficult, but you always kind of, I mean, you can look around college baseball already. You see teams that, quote unquote, aren't supposed to lose that are losing games in the midweek. So you have to be able to take care of this to start building that resume for the postseason, even as early as it is. South Carolina, 2 early, really just decisive wins. What stood out to you being at the park the last 2 nights?
Yeah, Wes, you're hitting the nail on the head there with, you know, needing to keep up with the midweeks. The thing that stood out to me, obviously, again, is their plate discipline. They're not letting bad teams, you know, have the opportunity to beat them, right? You know, they're not taking any bad pitches, right? So, you know, they're waiting for their pitch to hit, and when they do, you know, load up the bases, get a 3-run homer, you know. So I think that's big. They're taking care of the midweek. Also, the pitching has been really, really good. Obviously, we saw Matthew Becker last night coming back from the lat injury. He looked great, 5 strikeouts through 2 innings. So, and then defensively, they're also taking care of the job as well. So far, so good. Good start to the midweeks this season.
You mentioned Becker last night. Again, you know, on the pitch count, much like Roman Kimball was on Sunday, but put in a good, solid performance with those 5 strikeouts in the 2 innings. Once Kimball and Becker are both back to full strength, I know that they were both factoring into that Sunday spot in the weekend rotation. How do you see that decision going, especially when you talk about conference play coming up here in a couple weeks?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be one of the hotly debated topics because once Becker returns to full health, I could see him sliding into that Saturday role. So it's going to be him and Dylan Eskew competing to see, you know, who can stick around for SEC play. They're both going to be in the competition for it. But I would think Matthew Becker is going to win that out, and then Eskew is going to be a very good bullpen role and then also midweek starter for you. It's a good problem to have, right, if you can, knock on wood here, you know, keep guys healthy as well. It's a good problem to have too much pitching in college baseball. So if everyone can stay healthy and this pitching staff can stay hot, you're setting yourself up for a lot of success down the road.
Joe, I mean, I got to think at some point Eddie Copper kind of bouncing back from what was not the start he wanted out of the bullpen, you know, last weekend, but just to bounce back, really show no ill effects of that, and have a really nice start during the midweek. I kind of imagine if he's going to keep pitching like that, he's going to be in this conversation as well. So I don't want for us to get too far ahead of ourselves because the competition has not been good. So I want to see what all these guys do against legitimate SEC or, you know, similar competition. But I think if you're the coaching staff, you got to feel pretty good about what your pitchers have done just through their first 5 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Wes, Eddie Copper's one of those guys who bounced back, right? Reminds me a little bit of Eli Jones. Eli Jones struggled a little bit in his first couple appearances as a freshman, but then he got some midweek games under his belt and was really consistent from then on out. So shout out to Eddie Copper. He was able to get the job done on Tuesday. Really, really bounced back from his appearance on Friday, and that's exactly what the pitching staff in the coaching staff wants to see, right? So you're right, Wes. I mean, this room is really, really loaded, and as you continue to get more guys experience, I think it's going to continue to pay off and, you know, just continue to load up the back half and front half of your bullpen come April.
Again, talking to our guy, intern Joe from Gamecock Central, we knew there was going to be a lot of new faces factoring into this team early on this season, and I look no further than what we've gotten out of Blake Jackson and Tyler Cossey through these first couple games. Well, even throw in there Ryan Bakes, who got the chance to start at catcher last night. Which of these new guys has impressed you the most through 5 games?
I would say Blake Jackson, simply because when he came in from Charlotte. Not a whole lot of people had heard of him. Jack Melcher and I have talked about this just because, like, coming into the fall, nobody really knew kind of who Blake Jackson was. And then, he got into the fall scrimmages, started playing well, and everyone started to know, in the media and the coaching staff and the program, they started to know who Blake Jackson was. And then he continued his good play into the spring scrimmages, and now he's one of the better leadoff hitters in the SEC. He's one of a true leadoff hitter. He can hit for power. He can hit for speed. He's fast. Really, really good out there and left. So, yeah, he's one of the first real leadoff hitters or true leadoff hitters that South Carolina's had in a couple of years. And it's exciting. Quite a lot of folks. I mean, he's been really good so far through the first 5. So I would expect him to maintain that top of the lineup, and then also his position out there in left.
Well, I think, and again, it's 5 games in. This thing's going to have its there's going to be shifts, I think, potentially, because you look at the depth within this lineup and the depth on this team overall. I mean, you've got guys. Evan Stone obviously played a ton last year, and I think probably can make a case for being a potentially sort of late-inning defensive replacement at the very least. Carson Hornung, I mean, this guy started a bunch of games in his career at this point, was great at getting on base last year. Lee Ellis played a little bit yesterday as a freshman that I've heard some good things about. And then, I mean, you've got a guy like Kennedy Jones who transferred in, put up incredible numbers at his previous stop. I thought he would have been, I don't want to say a lock to start, but I would have thought he would be pushing really hard to be a starter this year. So it's interesting that this lineup, it's not the same exact group as last year, obviously. It's kind of, to me, it's like, all right, you got Petrie back, you got Messina back, you got Dylan Brewer back, you got Casas back. Casas obviously will want to get going soon. But then you bring in this kind of new cast of characters around them, but in a certain way, they've kind of just picked up where last year's squad left off in terms of the way they're getting on base and the way that they're not only hitting the long ball, but also being willing to take their walks.
Yeah, absolutely. This offense is so deep. Like you mentioned, Wes, you mentioned Evan Stone. Very, very good glove, one of the best gloves for a center fielder in all of the SEC. So he just needs to get the hitting around, and, he's competing for a starting spot more. But Dylan Brewer right now has it locked up, but a really good late inning replacement. Stone actually had a double last night, so he's continuing to work his way into those spots, late inning defensive replacement. But then again, his hitting is starting to come along as well. You brought up Kennedy Jones. He's on the right track as well. Didn't have the best spring, which is why we aren't seeing him as much early. But he's certainly getting his cracks at it. Right? He's one of the guys that they brought in from the transfer portal. He doesn't have a whole lot of eligibility left. I believe this is last year. So Kingston and Coach Lee are not going to put it to waste, right? They know that. So Kennedy Jones is still going to be a face. And then obviously Tyler Cosby, we brought up him too. He's had a really good couple of midweeks, starting to find his groove with the bat. Had his first home run in over a year of college baseball, I believe. So Tyler Cosby's been great in that DH hole. He can also play first as well. So there are a lot of different options. And obviously Wes brought up the firepower from last year. It's always great when you can return guys like Petrie, Messina, and then also a guy like Tal Lecroy as well.
We'll continue our conversation with the intern Joe. Turn our attention to basketball as you and Jack had B.J. Mack on the hard foul last night. We'll get into some of what he had to say coming up next. Real quick, I want to remind you about the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway for baseball, just like the Loyalista Special Teams Touchdown Contest back in the fall. $25 gets added to the pot every single game. When a Gamecock hitter finally hits a Grand Slam, you could be the lucky winner. Just go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. More with intern Joe coming up next here on the Garnet Trust Hour on the Game.
All right, y'all, continuing to welcome our newest sponsor here on the show, our friends at Classic Roofing, 803-590-7870, classicroofingsc.com. That's where you can get more information on their services, or you can set up a free estimate where they will come out to your home. They're going to check out your roof. They're going to let you know, hey, is this roof got 5 years? Has it got 10 years left? Or there's some small repairs that can help extend the life of this roof. They're going to answer all your questions. My friends Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer, they're both longtime residents of the Palmetto State, and they've got a wealth of experience spanning more than 20 years. Their team of experts is well equipped to handle all of your roofing requirements. That could be a residential project, a commercial undertaking, really anything in between. They have got you covered. Their mission, it's simple, to provide you with top-notch roofing solutions to not only protect your home, but also enhance its curb appeal. Call them today, 803-590-7870, or go to classicroofingsc.com.
Welcome back in. It is the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you on this Thursday morning. Continuing our conversation with our guy, intern Joe from Gamecock Central. We'll shift over to basketball. yesterday on the Hard Foul, which you can watch on the Gamecock Central YouTube channel. Joe and Jack Veltri had BJ Mack on as their special guest for about the second half of the show. In good conversation, we want to go check out the entire thing. And Joe, I think the timing of having somebody like Mack on is very interesting because this is such an important week for this basketball team where you go from having the blowout loss to Auburn a week ago. You have the, tough blow the lead at the end loss to LSU on Saturday. And then you have this entire week off where you don't have a midweek game, don't have to worry about any of that. We're heading on the road to take on a very good Ole Miss team that took them down to the wire at Colonial Life Arena a couple weeks ago. BJ Mack, being one of the leaders, one of the most veteran guys on this team, is really going to be one of the most prominent, figures in how this team responds to that adversity that they faced and how they get better going forward. Yeah, Tyler, absolutely. We're kind of lucky to get him on the show, right? Obviously, in a losing skid, you don't do a whole lot of media and stuff like that. But BJ, he held strong. He said that the things that they're taking from these two losses, is a lot of things that they can directly translate and fix in these next two games on the road, right? And they know they have to take care of business. And, a leader like BJ is going to handle that really well. All of the loss stuff and just, how do you right the ship stuff really well. So, he was great. It was great talking to him. And, this team knows what they have to do to kind of right the ship. There's, 5 games left and 3 of them are on the road. So, and then you've got the SEC tournament. So it's big picture. This team knows that they still have some business left to handle down the stretch if they want to, be set up for success in later March. BJ handled it really well, and I was, really impressed with the stuff he gave us.
Yeah, Joe, what was your biggest takeaway as far as, you talked about the things that need to be done to kind of get this little 2-game skid ended? What was BJ's kind of message as far as the things they're focused on right now and how they need to make that actually happen?
A lot of it was like on the defensive end and just kind of communication for situations, right? BJ said at Auburn, they kind of lost communication on the defensive end. They weren't switching soon enough to Auburn's cutters and stuff like that. So that was one thing, and it did not seem like it was a culture or an internal thing. It was strictly about the basketball, just little things that they need to tune up week in and week out. And he said against LSU, that last second shot, it was they drew up the right play. They got an open look, and it just didn't fall. So he said they obviously when you're shooting the ball poorly, you want to do the other things right, the fundamentals and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that if they're trailing, they need to get back, or at least not shooting the ball well. They need to get back to the fundamentals and just play good, sound basketball is one of those things, Wes. And again, talking to intern Joe from Gamecock Central about the conversation with BJ Mack on the Hard Foul last night, a lot of teams experience the ups and downs given how long the season is, and teams that don't have a good culture about them can kind of falter once they start to run into some of that adversity. And BJ Mack talked about this last night as well, but this team just has a really good culture about it, a lot of, leaders in the locker room, that kind of stuff. And it's one of those things where you have the confidence that, yes, this final 5-game stretch of the regular season is going to be tough, but you feel like the foundation of this team is solid enough where they're going to be able to deal with this, hopefully pop a couple more wins and put themselves in position to, do something in the postseason as well. Yeah, absolutely. So I've been really impressed with the culture on this team. A bunch of transfers and then a couple young bucks and fresh guys all waiting in the wings. So the culture's been really good. And BJ Mack brought up, it is confirmed, the Bahamas trip over in the summer was what really bonded them together. Just being able to hang out as a team before the season starts was huge. And then, these guys are all pretty like-minded. They all just kind of want to play basketball. And then, little Modern Warfare 3, stuff like that. So it's big, BJ Mack, this culture. And then obviously Lamont has a bunch of it too with the quarter zips and stuff. I asked BJ, how many quarter zips he thought Lamont owned, and he has no idea. I don't think anyone will have a true estimate on how many quarter zips Lamont actually owns. Maybe we'll get an answer someday, but yeah, the culture on this team is really, really, really good. And like you said, Tyler, it's going to certainly help them in this 5-game stretch. If they don't win all of them, this culture is going to show through, and certainly they'll take it off.
Yeah, tough matchup on Saturday. They go to Ole Miss. That's a team that definitely at home is capable of beating you if you're South Carolina. We saw the game at CLA early this year. South Carolina actually had a pretty big lead, was in control of the game. Ole Miss it felt a little bit like the LSU game, except South Carolina was able to hold off Ole Miss in the end. Joe, did y'all talk at all about the upcoming Ole Miss game with BJ? And if so, what did he say? If not, just what are your thoughts on kind of how big this game is?
Yeah, I mean, we brought it up with BJ a little bit more, talking about just kind of how tough it is to go on the road against a quality opponent like Ole Miss and then have to play another one just like A&M right off the bat. So, BJ, he said kind of similar, it was that, Ole Miss is quality. They almost beat you at home. So, and I also feel the same way, right? You cannot take this team for granted, right, just because you beat them. You're going to need to play even better because, they're at their home stadium. And we know what road atmospheres are like in the SEC. They've seen it as well. Auburn and Alabama didn't turn out too great for them, and those are both quality basketball teams. And, Ole Miss is also a quality basketball team. They will beat you if you let them. So you just got to play your game at the end of the day, and everything will take care of itself.
The game coming up Saturday for the men, 3 o'clock right here on the game. Pregame coverage starting at 2:30. You mentioned those guys playing Call of Duty in their free time. And BJ Mack, I think, even said doing it the day of game, of midweek games, trying to loosen up a little bit. Were you surprised to learn that Talon Cooper is the best when it comes to playing Warzone?
No, not at all. And I was surprised to know that the general, that's where that came from. And BJ, with a very straight face, said, it's because of all his call-outs. He's the best. And, that surprised me a little bit. But, yeah, the general, Talon Cooper being the best one, the skill part does not surprise me whatsoever. And, to play it on game day, I think it's great, to loosen up a little bit. So all power to him if it's working.
Absolutely. Well, very cool. Again, check out that full interview on the Hard Fouling Gamecock Central's YouTube channel from last night's episode. Appreciate it as always, Joe. We'll get you back in here soon.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Absolutely. Again, intern Joe from Gamecock Central. Quick reminder, coming up today, got some live shows from 3 until 6. Going to have the post-game show with Jay and Elijah out at Sound and Images on Bluff Road. And tomorrow, myself and Terry Ford going to be doing the halftime show from Griffin Pools and Spas from 12 until 3. We'll get back in here, wrap up today's edition of the Garnet Trust Hour. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you on this Thursday on The Game. Welcome back in. Garnet Trust Hour, Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you for a couple more minutes. Chris Clark will jump in with us at the top of the hour for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Very busy day here on the game. Got Carolina calls coming up at 6 o'clock. We'll hear from Coach Paris. Get his thoughts on what's been a little bit of a less busy week, not having midweek game, and looking ahead to obviously Ole Miss coming up this weekend, also reflecting back on what happened against LSU on Saturday. Then that'll take you right into coverage of women's basketball taking on Alabama tonight at 7 o'clock right here on the game. Pregame coverage going to be starting at 6:30 on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW. In fact, that game being at Colonial Life Arena, our guy Josh has informed us we have 2 pairs of tickets for tonight's game, women's basketball versus Alabama. Callers number 3 and 4 right now, 803-404-6100 will win that pair of tickets, or win their own individual pair of tickets, to tonight's game. Captain Dave standing by, waiting to take your call. Speaking of Alabama, as we wrap up the hour here, some surprising news coming out yesterday. And you know, when you talk about college football, college sports in general, so much of the culture of individual programs can be found within respective radio broadcast teams. And there are very few radio broadcasters in college sports that are as widely known as somebody like Eli Gold out at Alabama. News coming down yesterday, Eli Gold, who's had his share of health problems over the past couple years, but has since returned to the Alabama football radio booth, will not be calling Alabama football games going forward, as the university has decided to not retain him. Eli Gold has been very adamant that he is not retiring by any means, but new voice for the for the Crimson Tide coming up this fall.
Yeah, Eli Gold saying, "I will not be returning. The university chose to not bring me back. I have not retired." And I was kind of, obviously, we're not in that community.
Sure.
I don't know if I've ever heard one of his calls, to be honest, except for probably on a highlight or something, because there was no reason for me to listen to local Alabama radio.
But we're all familiar with him.
But I was looking through Bama Online to see what the reaction was there, because I figured that would be a good gauge of, you know, maybe people are like, maybe people didn't really like him and I just didn't know it or something. But as Jimmy Stein, I thought this post on Bama Online sort of summed it up. Said Eli's voice in so many ways is the soundtrack of the Nick Saban era. And so you're talking about a guy who's been there since '88, has seen lots of ups, has seen that point where Alabama was kind of just trying to find itself again, and then saw what was the most dominant modern program in college football, really, and was the soundtrack of that, was the play-by-play guy for every step of the way, except for, I think, 1 year where he had to take off for health reasons along the way. But such an odd decision by Alabama, you know, makes you wonder, like, what is driving that? Is this a sort of in-house political thing? Mm-hmm. Does somebody just not like the guy? I mean, I can't imagine he's made many enemies over there. It's just, I'm sitting there without speculating, wondering, what am I missing? What are we missing on this?
I think about this from the perspective of an Alabama fan, and you know, you mentioned you've been there since '88 and was the soundtrack for all the success that the Saban era, you know, had endured. And now the fact Nick Saban's gone, you're turning over this new leaf to Kalen DeBoer, and we don't know what that era is going to look like, and we still have 100 some odd days to find out what it's going to look like when they finally take the field. But you know, the effect of just kind of ripping the whole Band-Aid off, I guess, instead of taking it off inch by inch, where you move on from Nick Saban, or not move on from Nick Saban. Nick Saban chooses to retire, and now you move on from your radio guy as well. I mean, you're talking about an entirely new culture of Alabama football once you get into the fall, and whoever's going to end up voicing the thing.
Yeah, well, and so I'm kind of reading through this. There are some fans who sort of basically are just saying it was time.
Sure.
And obviously that's a job where the mental just ability that it takes, the quickness in which you have to be able to rattle off what is happening can be tough to kind of continue to do as you get older and older. And, you know, we all will deal with mental decline at some point. I'm not saying that's the case here, but just looking at some of the fan reactions, some people are saying, oh, I'm going to miss hearing his voice, but it was just time. So
Yeah.
I imagine that probably plays into it. And they've actually already said Chris Stewart will be handling their play-by-play. He, I believe, does their men's basketball. And I think Chris Stewart used to be what channel was he with?
That
I know
name definitely sounds familiar.
I think it was with one of those more local channels, actually in Georgia, maybe, if I'm thinking of the same guy. Anyway, he basically is going to, it sounds like from the reporting in Alabama, assume that role. And they're saying, I mean, the guy's good from what I'm reading here. It's just a matter of you really, if a guy has been at your place for that long, and as so well said here, he was the soundtrack of, I mean, one of the best eras in college football history.
Right.
You would kind of hope there could be a little bit more of a mutual parting.
Sure.
Even if it was, hey, man, it's time to just move on.
Yeah.
You would think there could be a way for this to be a little bit more of an easy divorce.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things with somebody like that. You'd at least maybe hope he kind of gets the swan song kind of season. Like, hey, last year, let's enjoy it. Kind of, go through the memories and all that kind of stuff instead of kind of coming to an abrupt end. But unfortunately, that's kind of the nature of the business. And a lot of new things happening out there in Tuscaloosa this fall. Obviously, with Kalen DeBoer, who's finally kind of seemingly put together his whole staff out there, and now Chris Stewart being the voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide when the fall does roll around. Things are changing quite a bit all across college football, and we'll jump into this. And when Chris gets in here with us in the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, we haven't even gotten to the 12-team college football playoff, and they're already pushing for more teams to jump in. So buckle up. We're in for quite a ride these next couple of years.
Yeah, we'll dive into that here on the other side. And, I mean, I'm excited about the 12-team. So I don't know why we're already adding getting to 14
because
potentially.
Money.
But yeah, that's always the answer. But kind of interesting. But we'll dive into that on the other side.
Absolutely. So that's next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Another reminder, you can always listen to us on the 107.5 Game app. Text wherever you go. Tune into us on the Game TV. Sponsored by Shepherd's Glass. Go to youtube.com. Search Game TV. Subscribe to us. Also hit the bell icon to stay notified anytime we do a live or upload a video. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Next here on the Game.
All right, guys, coming up, like Tyler said, we got Gamecock Central Takeover. It's brought to you, as always, by our friends at Firehouse Subs. Head on over to firehousesubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. Hit the Rapid Rescue, avoid the wait, and order right now. Let me tell you about the new Chicken Parmesan Meatball Sub. It is savory chicken meatballs, bright marinara, shaved Parmesan, melted